Welcome back. Let's now get some analysis. We're joined by Labour analyst Terry Bell just to look through the minimum wage announcement that we heard earlier by the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. Mr. Bell, thank you very much for joining us. Let me start then with this. What is your initial reaction to this proposed figure, the 3,500 Rand per month that the Government Commission recommended there?
Well, it's only a recommendation, it's a proposal. In fact, it looks terribly much like another stopgap measure, because this is going to be implemented, they say, over the next 2 to 3 years. Given the rate of probable inflation over that period, this is going to be inadequate grossly by then, because in any event, as COSATU correctly argued, and most of the surveys seem to show, 4,500 would have been probably the best wage. I'd like to look at some of the detail as well. I haven't had a chance yet. But for example, will this apply to the ministerial determinations, for example, in terms of domestic work, forestry work, and farm workers? That will be interesting as well.
You touched on briefly on what COSATU is likely to say about this, and of course we know that this proposed amount is 1,000 Rand less than what they'd initially put on the table. But what do you think will be the reaction from, I mean, you know, there's quite a number of stakeholders in this. What do you think will be the reaction from the other sectors who will now obviously have to now go back to their constituencies and discuss this figure?
Well, I think from the union point of view, they're not going to be terribly happy. I know that some of the unions definitely had said they didn't really expect to get more than 3,500, although everyone was hoping for 4,500. But there was a great expectation, I think, that almost this would come in immediately. I think there was an expectation across the sort of labour movement, and that's obviously not going to happen. These are just proposals. And I think Cyril Ramaphosa's comments about the rating agencies is very interesting. This is an attempt from a government's point of view, I think, to show that, look, we're all getting together, business, government, labour, we're all in the boat together, we're all going to pull together, so therefore you can see we're clearing up the mess, we do not require junk status. I think that's part of the reason as well. And I don't think that will wash necessarily with large sections of the labour movement. So there are going to be problems over the next couple of years. Karima Brown mentioned NUMSA. That is also a major factor. UMCU is not actually so much a factor because they're actually affiliated to NACTU, who were at the discussions at NEDLAC.
Now, you know, the Deputy President did emphasize the fact that this is not a proposed living wage, that it's just the minimum wage. So, of course, some would then argue and say, well, then we should be moving towards a living wage. We're still very far, aren't we, from that?
Well, I also have a major problem with this as well, and that is we're talking about only those people who are in full-time employment or part-time employment, but who are in employment. We have an increasing number of people who are becoming, as Johan Rupert said last week, unemployable. Not because they lack skills. Some of them have great skills. The trouble is that their skills are becoming redundant as automation picks up pace. So that is something we should be looking. We should actually be looking at a universal basic income rather than a wage. That is the problem, and we haven't actually begun to deal with that issue yet.
Now, Imran Valodia, the Commission Chair, he said part of the thinking that went into this sort of adjustment process was that, you know, the economy, the adjustment of the economy, and, you know, without having a negative impact on this adjustment. Do you feel that there will indeed be some kind of a negative impact if this proposal does indeed go forward?
No, I don't, because the point is, you see, employers do not employ any more workers than they need to. And in fact, they have to employ precisely the number of workers they need for their industrial processes or whatever they're doing. So therefore, they will continue to employ the same number. It's a false impression to say that higher wages will automatically mean that people will lose jobs. What it does mean, of course, is that if wages increase, and particularly in areas such as construction and mining, particularly quarrying, wages become more expensive to the employer, and therefore the capital expenditure on machinery becomes more attractive. And therefore, and I mean the current figure that I have is that for every industrial process that is currently automated, 60 jobs are lost, and sometimes for good. And that's the real problem we still have to deal with.
And I mean, what should we make of, you know, the fact that 47% of those that are employed actually earn below the proposed rate, the proposed minimum wage? Is that not a scary thought, you know, in our society?
It's a frightening thought, and if this is implemented in 2 years' time, imagine what inflation will do, given the way inflation has been moving. By the time the 3,500 comes in, one could imagine that perhaps a minimum, and 4,500 is actually calculated on some very good research which shows what an adequate nutritional diet is necessary for the average family of just 2 people and 2 children. Without worrying about things like rates, taxes, etc. We need 4,500 in order to sustain a family at a reasonable level. So in 2 years' time, or whatever, or 3 years perhaps, who knows? It may be 6,500 that will be necessary when we introduce 3,500. I think this is very much, it smacks to me of a stopgap measure, and it's actually going to resolve nothing.